So today I'm not going to read the quotes, but I want you to just look at the cliffs in the background and see all the sort of details that we would have. I'll tell you how I did those later, Sultanic. So, when you look at a cliff, there is a lot more detail than just what we did last week with textures and stuff. There's, little things like grass and trees and things on top of them. So today I'm going to show you how I created my redone scene, and then we're going to start adding details to our own things. So hello, I'm William. This is Basics with Blender episode, what's it now, 6? 4? 5? 9? I think it's 5. Yeah, so you may have seen in the starting soon screen that I have redone my stuff. So let me... Is it 4? I thought it was 5. Oh well. So let me open up. Well, I can just open up Blender and show you in there. So, in Blender, I have completely done the scene from scratch, and I've also done a little animation running the camera along the river, and then there is also the whole lake behind it. So, I've been a bit busy. So to make my life easier to make these characters, I did the best thing to do in 3D and took the lazy way out. I used one of my favorite things, a sort of add-on for Blender that allows you to do human shapes and things, and created and posed my own characters. There's still some details that I want to do, like chips and texturing and stuff. This is just raw object as it is. But I was getting a little bit I wasn't happy with how my hand modeled one looks. So the add-on that I used, if I just go into N, I've got a little tab here called MB Lab, and you see it's got a little link, mblab.dev. So let's go over there and show you. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you how to do it. And the terrain as well, that's a whole separate thing. I think I should do a tutorial on that separately, because that was a thing. But we're going to do the character stuff. So I'm not sure, hopefully this website doesn't show nudity, because there are a lot of naked models. Okay, they just crop it off. So MB Lab is an add-on that you can get from this website. You can download it, and basically it's a character creation studio tool, and it is super powerful. So if let me just pop that link into chat. And I should actually describe how to install an add-on in Blender, because that's a very useful thing to know. And let's see. I I didn't think about doing this earlier, but let me just quickly find my folder. I didn't turn my music back on as well. How boring. So, let me check my downloads folder to see where my things are. Okay, so when you're in Blender, let me just start a brand new scene. So I'm just going to quickly save this. New scene, just a general new scene. Why is my Blender being so slow? So under Preferences, so Edit Preferences, I think I probably need to switch to this view so you can see. There is an Add-ons tab in the Preferences, and it's really simple to install an add-on. You'll see that there's already like a whole lot of default built-in ones that aren't actually activated in Blender. And there's some really cool things if you dig in there and have a look. But if you want to install an external one, so say you downloaded MB Lab, just click the install folder file thing, go to your downloads, and then you just need to find the zip. So actually I have a whole lot of zips over here, but so I can't actually find it quickly because I didn't think about doing this, but you just need to click on the, here is actually this Dream UV Master, which was another plugin that I downloaded 2 weeks ago or so. You just need to find the zip, click on it, say install add-on. Job done. And then it should take you to the screen where it shows you that add-on, and you just need to click on the checkbox next to it to enable the add-on, and then it should be functioning. So with the MB Lab plugin, if I press N now to get the tool panel on the right. Let me switch to this one. So you'll see a little MB Lab tab over here. And from here you can create human characters, and it gives you the options, you know, of various, you know, like Afro female, Asian female, Caucasian female, Latino, Caucasian male, anime, or whatever you want. There's even got dwarves and elves. So I'm just going to click on a random one, select a Latino female. Actually no, let's go for the sculptures. So I guess Caucasian male, but that's kind of lame. Let's go to Latino male just for fun. No thank you, no waifus here. Inverse kinematic is, now this is going on to not basics for Blender, but I'll explain that further on. But inverse kinematics is a way of animating a character with bones that link up and move. So if you enable that, your character will be created with bones that you can move. You don't need to worry about basic muscles or anything like that. You don't even need to set it up with a renderer, because we're not going to use skin, we're going to use stones, so you don't need to do any of that stuff. And all you need to do is click on create character, and if you give it a second or two and delete the cube, you get a character which has tastefully got a black pair of undies on. You can actually turn that off in settings if you're not streaming. And here you've got settings for the character age, so you can make a character that's 80 years old, or you can make them younger or whatever. You can make them fat or thin. You can make them jacked or skinny. Now this is an 80-year-old jack man. And then if you can also do random character generation. and it also has some presets, so you can get like giants. There you go, that's a giant. Or you can get athletic, and you can change. So this is using Central American because we did Latino, and then you can get North American, South American. I don't know how it calculates those things, but there you go, whatever. So you can switch between easy ones, or if you want to have fun, if you go under body measures, you have all these different things. So you can look at, so let's go to eyebrows. Zoom in on the eyebrows, and you can completely customize how this person looks. You can go completely extreme, or you can do something realistic. Change the cheeks, you can make them have cheek creases, you can make their cheekbones super strong or whatever, you know. Of course you'll be way more refined with what you're doing than this, but you can really go ahead and make something that's looks like anything you want, really. So this was, if you saw my old original version of that animated version of my face, I created it using this, but it wasn't exactly perfect, but it's way easier than hand modeling it. So let's just say we've got this creepy character over here with his strange looking face, and say this is what you want to use. So you just need to say finalize. So under finalize tools, there is a finalize with textures and backup. That will save textures and things so that you can edit your character later on, and it will save like a backup text file so you can just load up your character at some point if you want. So I'm just going to save that, and then these options will change once that's saved, because then the editing of the structures and stuff will be applied, so you won't be able to change that anymore. And for some reason it's taking a really long time. I think it's because my streaming is slowing my computer down as usual. I do actually have a recording. Let me see. I think it is this one. So of the process I went through for most of this, let me see, is it this one? This is the one with the terrain. I shall show you it just now. No thank you. Stop the spam. Hey, mods, have fun. Seek. Okay, so I actually went through quite a few steps with this process, and I originally had a whole other version of the character that I created, and I still didn't like it, so I went and redid it. So again, so I actually redid this character about 3 times this weekend. So it looks cool, but he looks kind of more like a monk, and he looks, I don't know, I didn't like the clothing. So what I did is I recreated it using this tool, and went through a process of setting it up to actually use cloth simulation. So I did a little thing to create simple cloth pattern. I shall explain this just now. So I just made a simple thing, and then when you turn on cloth simulation, you can have it drape and fit the character. So this is super abbreviated version of that. So you can see I just made a really simple sort of cloaky thing with an open front and arms that seal shut. And then I get that to fit on the character. And then from that, I actually, if I can get this open, then I went ahead and I did a full cloth simulation by moving the character from the T-pose, the basic standing position, into a new pose so that the cloth would sort of dynamically drape and I wouldn't have to manually model it, because making fabric look realistic by hand is a tedious job. And I may have also redone this about 5 times, because this kind of looked like he was wearing robes or like mage pajamas or something. So I tried various things, you know, like shrinking the waist and stuff, just like sucking it onto the body using the shrink wrap modifier, but it just looked weird. So I went and redid it again, this time looking at other references. So where is this? Oh yeah, this video is 5 hours long because I forgot to stop recording it. So then I didn't record every single step, but I made a new set with a bunch of different cloth that I then resimulated. I cut the body into bits and then I made body armor out of it. So like a, what do you call it, a breastplate and greaves? I don't know. Tried various styles of helmets, and then I stopped recording for an hour or so. And then eventually I figured, you know, he doesn't need that cloak covering himself, so I did replace that. So this was just a multi-step process of just finding things that worked. I made a new helmet just out of the head, duplicated it, and then reshaped it a little bit to make it look, kind of looks like Magneto, but I dig it. Added the crown based on the Gondorian tree stuff, because if you remember from the quotes, he's wearing a crown. And then I did a bunch of different stuff to merge these all together, and I'll show you that a little bit later, to merge it into one sculptable shape. So that's not every single step, but that should make some sense. Okay, so now this has been applied. So I want to show you, so you'll see that your character has these funny little indicator things when you create it with MB Lab, and that's what you call an armature and a rig for your character. So that's used in animation. So if I go into under object mode with this selected, I go to pose mode, and then I just grab, say, this one, which is the hand controller or the arm controller, and I do G for grab. Instead of manually having to, you know, change everything on the character, you use this rig to change things. So I use this to animate the character to go into the pose that we want. So that's just grabbing each of these, rotating them as fit. And you can see how it can be a really simple process. Instead of having to manually create your character, you've got a simple one that you can use and do stuff with. Is this the head look thing? Yep. So as you can see, this can make things way easier. But for last week, I kind of wanted you guys to all just experiment, because taking shortcuts all the time is not perfect. But you'll see that it's a little, it doesn't like the wrist going up. The wrist goes super thin, so you might have to edit these things a bit yourself. But it also gives you nice controls. So let's see, if I grab these ones and rotate them, we can close them around our X. And you can pose it however you want. So maybe you want your character to be holding an axe out to the side or something like that. Super easy, makes things way easier to do stuff, and then you've got something that you can drape clothing on. So I'm going to show you super quick stuff. So today's more like quick tips on how to make things easier. It's not going to be deep tutorial on how to do things. Let me just reset it to default pose. So cloth simulation is, as you might have seen in those videos, really powerful and fun. I can sort of mess around it with for ages because it's just super cool. So I'm not going to do a full character clothing stuff because that was, as you saw, a lot of time spent on that. But I am going to just add a simple like t-shirt or something here, or yeah, I don't know. So I'm just going to add a plane. So I add mesh plane. I'm going to go into the side view, edit it, rotate it 90 degrees, grab it and shrink it with S, so scale it down. And then I'm just going to position this sort of where you can imagine a shirt or something would come. So I'm just going to grab the edges, stretch that up, and then actually I'm going to put this into the middle and use our favorite thing, the mirror tool, the mirror modifier, so then I can just work on one side and not have to replicate everything twice. So I'm doing the Control R to add a loop, and then I'm extruding edges out to make sleeves. So at the moment that's kind of basic and won't really do anything, and it's only in the front as well. So I'm going to select everything, and then I'm going to say Shift D to duplicate and move it to the back of the body. Since it's a direct duplicate, one thing that I found when I was doing my stuff is that later on I discovered that the normals were facing the wrong way because I forgot to do this next step. So with these back faces selected, say mesh, normals, flip, and you won't see any difference by default, but imagine it's just saying inside is the outside now. Okay, but as it is, if I do a cloth simulation with this, it's just two pieces of cloth and they're going to fall down. So if I go into the physics properties, which looks like a little rotational circle thing, this is where you get all the simulations and stuff that you can do in Blender. Lots of cool things here. But there is a little cloth tab here. So if I turn on cloth and then I just play, so if you look at the bottom, there's little play buttons over here. So that's where you go and get animations to play. So if I press that, you see it's just two sheets of cloth fall straight down, which is accurate, I guess, but not very useful right now. So what we want to do is actually have these two sheets joined together. And the way that why I'm doing it like this is because it's way easier to make these shapes as you would actually make a shirt than it is to model it on the character. So like when you're making clothing, you get a plan or something, and then you cut out shapes of cloth and sew them together to make the shirt. Well, we're literally going to do that. We're going to sew it together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click into the vertex mode, and I'm going to select edges here, and so each vertex that aligns with the other one, I'm just going to press F, and you'll see that creates a little edge between the two. So if I go and do that for all of these ones that line up with each other, and yes, this is super low poly. I'm not going to go through the whole process. I should have actually, but so what that does is you've got these little edges between bits, and if I scroll down in the cloth simulation to shape, you'll see that there's a little button here called sewing. So if I click that, what that does is it pulls loose edges together. That's what it says. So a loose edge is these ones that don't actually have a face. So if I now play, they snap together. So it's like it's instantly shrunk to fit together. Though still it's kind of pointless because it doesn't do anything, it just falls down infinitely. That's because not every body when you create it in Blender is automatically set up as collisions, because that will slow down things. So you need to select your character and say under the physics tab, turn on collisions. There are a bunch of different details that you can change here, but by default it should work fine. So if I now press play again, my super low poly shirt snaps together and attempts to do stuff, and actually it's snapped in half. So I think that is because my modifier was not merging my bits together properly. So I'm just going to increase the merge limit. So under the mirror modifier, merge limit says that any vertex that is this distance from the mirror point will merge together. And I think maybe it was just my things were not properly set. There you go. So of course you wouldn't want to do this on such a low poly thing, but we've got a cardboard shirt in this guy. So what I can do is I can go now and add edge loops in here. As many as you feel will make it detailed enough for a simulation, but not exceedingly complicated. So let's do it. You can also just say subdivide, but depending on how the mesh was created, it might not subdivide your faces in an even way that you want. But I'm just saying Control R, click, Control R, click. Well, just look at the density and imagine if each one of these was one flat thing, how smooth a shape would you get if you bent this around the shape? And I'd say this is, for a basic shape, fine. You can always add a subsurf modifier later. And you'll just get used to the density of these stuff, like what feels right and not. So unfortunately, when it's dense like this, you have to go and add these loops manually across. I'm just going to go back and delete all this because I don't want to add those loops again. So I'm going to select all, Shift D, slide it back. I'm actually also going to bring these ones closer so that it's a tighter sort of fit. And I'm going to do that normals flip on this. So you'll just need to remember that here we need a space for the head. So I'm not going to join the middle. I'm just going to start joining from around the neck. Otherwise, it's not a shirt, it's a I don't know, hood. So this is a little bit of a tedious process. You could probably do another method like bridging it and then just deleting the faces. Actually, that's probably a good idea. Let me try that. Let me just undo this. It's always a good idea to find a faster way to do things. So if I select these two edges, two edge loops, the top and on each side, and I go into search and I say bridge edge loops. Yeah, there you go. Simply fills that in nicely for us. And then we can go and say delete faces for the whole. And then for all of these ones, we can say delete faces only. So when you say delete faces, it deletes the edges as well. But we want to keep the edges. So I'm going to say delete and say only faces. So that'll leave the edges along the edge here. And then I'm just going to repeat this on the insides. So bridge edge loops. And then since I've left the holes open on the bottom and the sleeve, I can just say delete only faces. So now we've got, basically think of these as strands that will sew the two sheets together. And it's now a lot more detailed. So if I now play, we get a sort of an okay-ish fat looking shirt. It's not perfect. We might want to add a little bit more detail. So I think this also is trying to collide too far from the mesh. So there are a couple of ways you can mitigate that. You can either go into your character, go to the physics and change the thickness of the shirt, the body, or you can select your shirt itself and go to the collisions tab and either increase the quality, so that'll make the simulation a little bit more accurate, but it'll go slower, or you can change these distances and stuff. You just might have to tweak things a little bit. And for extra realism under the collisions tabs, there's also a thing called self collisions. So by default, the shirt doesn't collide with itself, which can be fine if you're just like simulating a sheet of cloth. It might not ever need to collide with itself, but a shirt or like a cloak or something more complicated might fold into itself, and then you would want to turn on self collisions. But that really does slow down the simulation. So let's see if this looks a little bit better. Not great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add another, so I'm going to add a subsurface modifier, and I'm just going to use it on 1. Unfortunately, it won't add those loops in the sections where it subdivides. So we're going to get a little bit of a more stitched look. But for medieval clothing, I think that would look fine. So it might be that my thing was just too low poly for a good simulation. And if you want to stop it, you just need to click on pause or press the escape key, because you don't need to go all the way down. Okay, so there are some issues with this. Now there is a tutorial I saw on YouTube, which is basically where I got this from. Let me just quickly find, give the guy some props. Let's see, what was his thing?
Hello, it's Marco and Torch Jim.
No, not that. Sorry, I didn't think about doing this again as well. I've been working on that thing so much. Oh yeah, here we go. So this guy gave a nice little tutorial on this. If you couldn't follow all these steps, he does go a little bit more in detail on these things. Give him some props. I enjoyed his tutorial. And he's actually done a few more in detail ones for like dresses and more complicated clothing, so he might be useful. Because I'm going to cover a lot of stuff in today's stuff, so. But that's how you can get a nice little, more accurate looking clothing with some nice folds and stuff. If you turn on shade smooth and then add a subdivision surface modifier underneath the cloth, you can get looking a lot more detailed than the simulated cloth that you created was. And you see we've got little stitched edges and stuff because of the way we created this, but kind of looks cool. It's like a more loose stitched item of clothing. I've got hiccups, sorry. So depending on how you want to create your character, that's, you know, one thing to make things easier. And then once you've got all this done, you just need to select a frame where you like how your cloth looks. Select your shirt and then you can say apply modifiers. You could go one by one and say apply, 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 apply. But it's way easier to just select the thing, go into the search menu and say apply modifiers, and it will do them all together. And then you've got a static mesh that's not changed by anything, it will just stay like that. And then with that, we can then do stuff to actually join it together into the sculpture so we can make it one mesh. So a useful modifier for this is the solidify modifier. And what this does is basically just makes it a thick object. So it doesn't work great depending on how complicated your mesh is. If it's like a simple plane, it will work fine. But if we've got normals that are going all over the place, like especially these areas around here, you might have to turn on clamping over here, which will make it less thick, but it will stop these sticky out bits. And you can also try turn on high quality normals. So it's not perfect, but I found it worked pretty well for what I was trying to do. So if I just hit apply on that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply modifiers on this. It doesn't like it having, so when you create the MB lab, it adds a thing called shape keys, and it doesn't like you applying modifiers on these. you can do some cool stuff with these. You can have a look at all of them. They've got numbers over here where you can change things. Like here's one for closing eyes. So if you see, if I drag this to 1 over there, the eye closes. But we don't need to worry about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all of these, and I'm just going to go minus to remove them. There's probably a easier way to delete them, but I haven't found out. So I'm just going to go and delete them all. There are quite a few. Is there not a delete all? Oh, there is. There is delete all shape keys. There you go. So I just clicked on the little down arrow there. Delete all shape keys. So now I should be able to say apply modifiers. Yeah. So that will remove the rigging and stuff. So if I delete those now, you would have wanted to have posed your character before you do this. But then what I can do is I can go into it and add a new boolean modifier. And the boolean modifier is a thing that you can use to either cut out parts of an object or add parts of other objects to an object, so you can make it one thing. So if I click on the little eyedropper over here in the boolean modifier, and I know I'm zooming through these things, today is a quick tip thing, and I just go over the shirt, click on that, and then I'm just going to click on union. So union will be joining, difference will be showing you the areas that are different, and then intersect will cut out or show bits that are separated. So I'm just going to click on apply with union, and I can delete the shirt. And the reason why you'd want to use this is it would not actually create bits in the inside if using the boolean, and sometimes it can be a little bit wonky, but and then what I did to make mine feel more aged and sculpty is I go into sculpt mode, and there's a tool called remesh, and if I click on that, and you can change these options, but let's see what remesh does at these settings. Too low, not too coarse. Let's go to 0.001. I think I did show you the Vox remesher briefly last week. This might be a little bit complicated. And depending on your mesh, it will fix up a lot of little weird things. It won't fix the mesh, but it's going to merge them together and make a nice soft thing. So that's actually more detailed than I wanted. So I'm going to go for 0.006. And that was too little. So somewhere in between there. I like it because it smooths out some of the details, so we get a more worn, weathered look, and it blends in these shapes, and then you can start, having fun. And what I also did on my other sculptures is I looked at bits on my model, like this shirt I didn't do properly, but let's imagine this was your final thing. If you had an actual 1,000-year-old sculpture with bits shaped like that, well, they'll fall off. So what I did is I created a bunch of different shapes, just rough shapes, nothing special. So I've got a cube here that I'm rotating, and I'm gonna grab it and cover that bit, and I'm gonna add a Boolean modifier, select the cube, and then you'll see that if I look at the outline over there, it's cutting out bits. So you can get some really cool effects of just cutting out sections, and then you like apply it. Maybe you want it like the hand fell off. Well, let's go all the way, cut the arm off. Not that in the story that this is how it looked, but if I do that, this is using the difference thing for the boolean. If I apply that, drag that cube away, what we've got is a filled in edge over here. So it's not just cut out, it's actually filled in. So like if it had actually been a solid volume of object. And you can also use this if you have a, let's see, a thinner shape like this. We can use this to add in more, like this would be more sort of a stylized thing, like cracks and stuff to your thing. So let's go to boolean, grab this and apply. So you can just super easily just add in details of like cutting out bits and stuff. So my shirt was not thick enough, you can see, so it didn't actually fill in that bit. So if you find that with your thing, you can just go into edit and grab your edges over here. Let's see if I can grab that edge. That's all one big loop. Let's just select the inside bit. I'm just doing a really quick example of this, and then stretch that. No, that doesn't work because it's so detailed. So ideally you would kind of want to put more detail and have it thicker or more close to the body and stuff. Or you can fix that by just making a tube in boolean and joining your thing together, because we're just making a sculpture. So, and then from this you can go into sculpt mode and do things like, let's go into this, what's it called? Crease. Sharpen up edges, smooth out things with the shift key. Flatten out those cheekbones and stuff like this, so you can make it just look a little bit more like what you want. And you'll see that I do have the mirror on, so it's doing to the left and the right of the face at the same time. So that was just a super quick breeze through of the steps that I went through. So if I actually open this file, this is what I created. So I've got bits where I did a boolean to join in sections, and the remesher makes the nice thing of having it sort of join the cube at the base to the feet and things like that, so you can really, it feels more like one object. And then I did stuff like cutting out with a boolean modifier bits that I felt would have fallen off, like maybe this very thin section of cloak, so I cut that out, and bits of the axe I did cut off a little bit of that, and just like more worn and weathered edges and lots of the cloth and stuff that I cut off and things like that. So I did two versions of this, one for the left and one for the right. And then if I go into the final one, can show you the other one. So this one, you can see I did little boolean modifiers to cut off one half of the axe, little cracks and stuff in it, bits of the sleeve that I chopped off, just little holes, make it look worn and weathered. And I kind of have mine sort of semi-joined in with the cliff, because I had imagined this sort of thing you would kind of carve out of natural stone. If you actually look at the Lord of the Rings movie, they kind of had like a little quarry next to the one where they had been digging out stone and stuff, which was a cool touch. So now mine kind of look a little bit similar but different because they're the same model. I wasn't going to go into detail of actually adding two completely from scratch ones, but they've got a little bit of different cloaks and weathering on them. And then I'm going to later on sculpt some more details in the face. So mainly I want to do the eyes and the eyebrows because the description is of them frowning over the landscape. What was it? Let's see. Blurred eyes and cranny brows, they frowned over the north. Oh yeah, I was going to add some facial hair as well. So you can see there's the quarry in the background of this foot. Here you can see it on the left behind here. There's this big quarry where they designed the set for this to have. Well, it was actually a little model that they did this on. So on Thursday we're going to go into final texturing techniques and stuff. But now I want to show you the landscape. So, as you may have seen, the description of the lake, damn, I forget the name now. It's basically an oval-shaped lake, and then in the middle of it, well, not in the middle of it, on the far end in the middle, there is basically a tall rock, which is described as being like this tall, sharp-sided cliff called Tall Brandir, which no man had ever set foot on because it's so tall. And then behind that is a gigantic waterfall called Roros, probably because it roars. So I haven't actually fully modeled that end of the scene out yet, but basically we've got this big island over here in the middle, and then it flows around on two sides, and then I do need a little bit more work on here, but there's supposed to be two hilltops. One is called Amon Hen and the other one is called Amon Lo. Those are the hills of seeing and the hills of hearing, which they were basically some Gondorian sort of settlements. I don't know what they were, like bases. So in the movie, that's the place where Frodo climbs up to the top, puts on the ring and sees Sauron looking for him. That was from Amon Hen, the Hill of Sight. And random fact, so in the movie, the waterfall is right on the edge here of the island, but in the book, all the action actually happens behind the island, and when Frodo and Sam use the boats, they go across behind the island, between the island and the waterfall. But in the movie, they do it further out in front of the island. Yeah, I know. Geek nerd. So, I shall describe how I did this. So I basically recreated the entire scene, and I didn't do it in the technique that I described to you. So I didn't do the create a plane and extrude it out. I created a plane, and then I applied a specially created terrain texture that I made in Unity using the Unity terrain tools. So there are lots and lots of cool tools for eroding terrain and creating cool stuff, but the terrain tools in Unity are basically for free, and you can use them and you can create them. And now they have a erosion tool that you can use in that. So that's how you can get these cool eroded terrain. So you just create simple shapes and then erode weathering and stuff to make it look this sort of natural thing. And I have created this scene actually as real scale. So if you look in my details, it's 30 kilometers by 37 kilometers, which kind of matches what I could find for this lake. This oval-shaped lake should be 10 by 20 miles, which equates to somewhere around those figures, considering I do have some land around here. And then I went in here and I just used the sculpt tool and Dino Topo turned on, so I could go in and add new details to the mesh as I was going in. So I could pull out areas and add new geometry just to make things more exciting. So, yeah. Questions? Like, what would you want me to show you how to improve in your scenes? Because, yeah, I know I breezed through that, but we have like an hour now to focus on stuff. Well, what do you want to improve on yours? Because I've still got lots I'm going to do on this. But anything for modeling and stuff, we'll do texturing and materials and rendering on Thursday. So modeling, sculpting, modifiers, which of these things appeals to you more to learn? Because otherwise what I was going to do is just continue adding more detail to my cliffs over here. I will show you how to animate cameras and stuff on Thursday. I think that's just too much information today. So with the Dino Topo dynamic topology turned on, I can just go in here and paint in like little rocks and carve in sections to make it feel more natural. So I'm just gonna make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, I've kind of gone off from basics because I really just wanted to finish the scene. But you can tell me like specific elements that you would like to see covered in more detail, because I can go back and do stuff. Now in the sculpting tool, you can also use textures on them. So we can add a texture on here. So we create a texture. If we go now to texture, we can use a let's use a Voronoi texture on here. So this should now give us some... Come on, Blender, don't freeze up on me like that. Seriously? Didn't want you to undo that. Does it not want to use a... There we go. So then I can paint on here with a little bit of rough detail. It'll be slower, of course, because I'm using a texture and dynamic topology on here. But the nice thing about having this animated camera over here is I can just slide through it and find bits that would look better with a bit more detail, or that start clipping into where I want the camera to move. And this is all still using Eevee, so that's that game engine renderer thing. Well, game engine technology style renderer in Blender. But we can go and see what it would look like in cycles, which is the more accurate one. Let's see. I haven't actually looked at this. It needs to calculate it. But the nice thing is that it should be anything you can do in Eevee you can do in cycles, but better. It doesn't always go the other way around. You can't do all the things you can do in cycles in Eevee. So here's what it would look like with a little bit more realistic lighting. So I haven't got any textures on the cliff. All I've done is make the water look a little bit more like water. And as you can see, this is way slower than the Eevee version of things, but you get much more natural lighting. But I think this slows down my computer too much. I'm going to switch back to Eevee. But as you can see, it looks pretty decent for something that's calculated real time. So the little animation that I rendered out took like 2 seconds a frame. Whereas if you were doing it in cycles, each frame of this rendering would take if not minutes, hours perhaps. And this is actually animated water, but it's not very well made material. I'm going to be making that better for Thursday. So let me just go into, if you're doing sculpting, what's can be useful is to switch into the viewport shading mode, and under the drop down there's a thing called matte cap. So by default you'll be using Studio, which looks like this, which can be fine, but matte cap uses a special material which just overlays onto the surface, which can make it easier to sort of see details when sculpting. So these ones are clay materials, so these two red and brown ones, but then you get other ones that are designed for things like, what's this one for? This one is rim lighting, so you can check things. You can even see like what the normals or something would look like, which is pretty useful. But it's a nice way to see details when sculpting without having to have a detailed mesh or something like that, or a proper lighting system or something. I think working with a texture on my sculpting makes it too slow to work with on my computer, at least. Dynamic topology turned off. You must just check that, because sometimes it turns itself off for some reason. So I'm just making little bits feel more craggy and natural, and then as soon as that's done I'm going to show you how to add some cool stuff to yours. Or maybe I should do that already, because just watching me is going to be maybe not as exciting as doing something you can do yourself. So I'm just going to add a little bit more detail quickly, and then I'm going to show you how you can add foliage and grass and vegetation in a really simple procedural manner. Doing stuff procedurally is way better in the long run than doing everything manually, because if you've got a 30-kilometer scene like this, you can't do everything manually. Like, I can't manually sculpt all the rocks and stuff on here. I'm only doing it on the areas that are getting viewed up close. So here the camera gets very close to this rock, so I'm going to add a lot more detail onto this. Yeah, then we're going to do some procedural texturing and stuff on Thursday, which is going to be fun. So all that stuff I was doing with UVs with you the other day, we won't have to worry about. We can do stuff that alleviates the need for having to do that, because that shit's annoying. Just anything to make these things look less rounded and more jagged and ominous, like the book describes them. And I haven't actually looked at how things look underwater, but I want to do stuff with having some rapids and things with rocks and stuff coming out of here. That I haven't figured out how I'm going to do yet, but that'll be fun. But yeah, that's not basics. So this is really just sculpting and making it look more natural, and I'm not really doing a whole lot of stuff. I'm just going over bits that look less refined than others. I'm trying to get a little bit of that sedimentary layers and stuff. So I'm trying to sort of make a semi-consistent bits of some sort of tougher rock and then worn in bits near it and stuff like that. Okay, so I think I'm gonna leave that as is now. For now, I'll go back tomorrow and do stuff myself. But we'll worry about materials on Thursday. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna do stuff to add vegetation in bits and pieces of here where you think it would actually have vegetation. So vegetation is not going to grow out of these backwards bits, but it might grow on these slightly upwards facing bits, so like little bits of grass or something. So what can be useful is you go into edit mode and you can go to face select and find faces on your model. So you can do this sculpting on your simple planar models and it could look cool as well. And then just find things. Let's like use some of these and definitely these ones, because these ones are all on the top. And then you can say select similar, and it gives you a whole lot of options of how you can select similar faces. And what you can do is say you can select similar normal, so that will select all faces that have a similar angle on them. And it was actually less than I was expecting. It's I'm gonna select none. I'm just gonna select this region over here. I'm just gonna select a wider variation of angles. I'm gonna say select similar normal. So that'll be anything facing mostly upwards. Still less than I thought. But it's fine, it's still quite a lot of bits. Let's see in our path here. Yeah, we've got quite a lot of interesting looking bits over here, especially in that section, and then on the top over there. Yeah. And what we can do is we can go into the object data properties, add a vertex group, and assign what we've got selected here. So just click on assign with your thing selected. So if I say select none now and I say select, it reselects those. So that's showing you that your vertex group did work. So now I can leave edit mode and I can now show you how to work with particles in Blender. So yeah, I'm trying to just go through like all the various functions in Blender in one scene sort of. So particles and hair are sort of one and the same in a way. They just use things slightly differently. So imagine particles like if you've got explosions, and then you can also create hair and in this case grass and foliage out of that. So under the particle properties tab, I'm going to click plus, and this will add a particle emitter, particle settings over here. And so what this will by default do is just create particles, but we want to create hair. So we're going to click on hair and switch it to hair. So now if you zoom out, depending on your scene, you might see some random bits of hair sticking out. So you've got hairy land. Not ideal, but what we're going to do then is I'm just going to turn on advanced, not because we're necessarily doing advanced stuff, but it'll just give us more options to work with. And what we just need to do is we need to go down to vertex groups, and under density just select the group that we created. So what this will do is we'll say, based on the vertex group where that is enabled, then we can grow hair in that point. So if I now just pan along here, it's really hard to see the hair because it's so sparse. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to turn up, at the moment it's only creating 1,000. Let's create 10,000. And I think actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit my vertex group, and I'm going to just have it in the region of the river. So then I'm going to go B, shift click to deselect, and just deselect the bits in our region over here around the river. Just making sure I actually was on vertex thing. I was actually on face, but I want to get all the vertexes, and I'm just going to remove these selected ones from the vertex group. This will just concentrate all the particles into that one region. So if I now go into object mode, now you see that all the hair is just growing in this one region over here, so you can actually see it. So don't worry, we're not making a hairy ground, we're just going to turn that into other stuff just now. So let's find something that looks easier to see. Maybe this. So let's just find a bit of our scene, so something like over here, and we're just going to go back into the hair, and firstly we're just going to change we've got 400 meter long hair. Yeah, we definitely don't want that. Let's go for 2 meter long. So now we just need to find some visible hair. It might be coming out from weird spots. Let's just go for 20 so I can quickly find a place with it. So some of it is also coming out from under the ground, which is not ideal. There is a piece over here. So we're going to go for 2 meter. So we've just got these tiny little strands over here. But we're going to imagine each one of these strands as a clump. So you don't have to manually do that. There is a thing called children. So what this will do is each hair or strand of grass or plant over here, we will make it as a parent for others and surround it by however many other ones. So let's go for 50. So each one of these will have 50 children. Now it's got a display amount and a render amount. We kind of want them to be the same because we're just looking at how we want it to look. We don't want it to be different when we render it. So we're going to make them the same. And let's adjust the size so you can see there's a few tiny strands over there. And let's change the radius. Let's make this 2 meters as well. There we go, that's more like it. So each one of these clumps will be sort of a patch of grass as it is. Maybe even 1 meter. And what we can do is there is a thing called clumping. So imagine these are using hair terms, so a clump of hair would be just a bit that's gone together. So you've got different settings over here, and we can have it either clump inwards or clump outwards, which is more like what we would want. So if we clump this backwards a little bit, let's go for -0.6. We've got a little clump of hair that sort of looks like a little bushel of dry grass or something. And there's a whole lot of different things here we can change. But what we're just going to do is we're going to turn on roughness. And let's turn on some, let's go for 0.05 random roughness. That's way too much. Let's go for 0.05. So now we've got a sort of really random looking bushel or something over there. And you can see all around the terrain we've got random bits of this. Maybe not enough in our path over here. Let's have a look. Yeah, there's some bits that were selected that weren't ideal. But maybe if we go up to, let's go for 20,000. My computer might start suffering, but let's see what happens. Yeah, I don't know why it selected vertical ones. It should not have selected vertical faces by selecting those normals. But you can always go and manually edit that vertex group by painting the areas that you want. So like this lower area here, we've got a little bit of vegetation on here. Hey, sup? Welcome. Toot. So I'm going to cover how to do materials and stuff for this. Yeah, we really don't want it on the vertical walls. That should not have happened. Let me go back, edit this. Thanks, huh? So let me just deselect all, select none. And I'm going to say select. And why was it selecting vertical patches? I really don't know. I'm going to remake this. Let's just select none. I'm going to hand paint this. I'm making a scene from The Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you've read it or seen the movies, but there's the two giant statues. It's called the Argonath. So it's two gigantic sculptures of kings between the rivers. And I'm just making a whole scene of the river canyon and the sculptures, and then the big lake at the end. So I've got my little, well, not little, I think they're about 100 meters or so tall sculptures of the two kings. We just still need to add a little bit more detail to. But right now I'm just doing a little bit of detailing on the cliff, so adding some vegetation and things like that. So that's, I'm just going to paint this in manually, so I'm going to say C, the circle select tool, and just paint on the specific areas that look like they would be able to have plants on them. I don't know why it was doing like that earlier. I don't want it to be too dense because this is supposed to be like fairly dry, desolate landscape, so I'm not trying to fill in an entire place with plants. Let's make some up top here as well, because I think we're going to focus a lot of attention of the camera around. What are you making? Yeah, so just going to put some grass on the top here. And over there. Where else? Let's go in this lower bit there. You can always, when you're using the circle select thing, you can shrink down your region, so I don't want to select huge bits in some of these places. Sometimes doing these things manually works a little bit better than the auto select things, which can be annoying. I thought it was going to work fine. Let's see. Sometimes it's fun to just make a scene and see what it turns into. I do that a lot. Let's put a little bit over here. Come on, Blender, don't freeze. Accidentally unselected. So I'm just gonna select a couple more bits, but I think I mainly want to focus on the end segment. So I'm going to create a new vertex group, assign these current vertex to that. And let's go to this. I'm going to turn that down from 10,000 to 1,000 because we don't need so many now, and switch it to group, the new group. That looks better. So it's still spread out on some vertical areas, but that's because I have so many over here. If we go down to, let's go to 500. Yeah, sculpting landscapes I find is good. Well, as I was saying earlier, I kind of make my landscapes in Unity. There's a cool tool that you can sculpt terrains with in there. And you can do like erosion effects and things like that, which can look pretty cool. So yeah, I've got a little bit of plants and stuff, and I think it looks alright. I might tweak it a little bit, but if I switch into the rendered-ish mode, we've just got this little bit of variation on the cliff face, which makes things look way more realistic. They may be a bit big, and we can also, so say you want to create, so we've got a little bit of grass now. What if we wanted to create some like dead trees or something? So I'm going to add a, let's start with a cube. Now where is my cube? Because my scene is so gigantic I can't even find my cube. So there it is. I'm going to scale it down, and this is going to be the trunk of a tree. I'm going to grab a face, grab that. I'm going to turn off that. I'm going to grab it up. I'm going to, let's see, view. Is there not a nice way to just zoom in on here? thought there was. I'm just going to zoom in here, and I'm going to knife it in half, so then I've got 2 bits, and then I'm going to select one, grab out 1 bit of that branch, this is one problem when you've got a scene that is absolutely enormous like this. I'm going to extrude out another one. Maybe, actually, this is being a little bit annoying, the size of the scene. I might actually want to edit this in another file. Actually, no, it's alright. So I'm just going to make something that's sort of roughly a dead tree. I'm going to just fatten up the base. Shrink down some sections, extrude out. Things. I've never really done a full landscape in Blender before, so this is also kind of new to me. I usually just do smaller scenes. Let's see. Just rotating things around. Doesn't look super realistic, but this is like a 1 meter tall thing in a 100-meter tall canyon, so I think it'll be alright. So I'm just going to shade smooth, and we can also add a displace modifier using a new texture with a, let's use a noise, no, not a noise, clouds, and let's see, yeah, I know it looks crazy right now, but if I turn down the strength, no, okay, it does look terrible. Texture coordinates, global, let's see. Yeah, so my idea is then now when I have this with the really low strength displacement on here, the idea is now when I duplicate this as a particle, it will sort of deform around. That's the idea, at least. Whether it will work, I don't know. Doesn't seem to be working. Global, yeah. Is it working? It doesn't seem to be changing. Nah, okay, I'm just going to ignore that step then. Okay, so I'm going to go into this. I'm going to add a new particle system. So I'm just, in the same way I did the first hair thing, I'm just going to add a new particle system. But instead of creating hair, I'm just going to use an emitter. I'm going to do the same thing with density to the group that we had selected. And you'll see that it creates little blobs. And when you animate it, they're now flying all over the spot. But we don't actually want that. So what we want is a lifetime. So lifetime is how long they last, of at least as long as your scene would be, but I'm just going to make it 99999, because who cares. Frame start is the start that your particles will spawn, and end is when it will stop spawning. So I'm just going to make it 0, 0, so start and end at the same frame. So that means they'll all spawn at once. But then, since these have velocity, they're going to be falling down. So I'm just going to turn that to 0. And now, it's still got velocity of some sort. Oh, it's got gravity. Physics, none. So it's using Newtonian physics. We just turn that to none. And now they should just stay absolutely stationary for their entire lifetime. And then what I'm going to do, we don't need 1,000 trees in here. We'll have, let's go for 80. I don't know how it will look. It might still be too many. Yeah, this might be a bit many. Let's go to 50. And then what we just need to do for this is under render, they're currently being rendered as halos. We want to render them as objects. And we just need to turn that into our tree. So let's zoom out, find our tree, use the little eyedropper, click on our tree, bonk. And now, okay, that's still under the render settings. We want viewpoint display as rendered. Where's our trees? Oh, the scale is absolutely tiny, that's why. So now we've got random trees. Didn't need to do that, so let's go to 0.5 and make it random by 0.5 as well. And rotation, let's see, we want to rotate them around a bit, so I'm going to turn on rotation, randomize, and I'm just going to make that fully random, and it shouldn't animate, I don't think. Yeah, I think it's a little bit too much randomness because now some of them are lying sideways. And you can do this using multiple layers, so it's not just all one tree. But let's see. You'll see that my scene has slowed down a lot now that we've got plants and foliage over here. So let's just find a bit over here. So they're using a horrible material. So it duplicates it from the original tree that we created. So let me just find that up here. Also, I just want to move it so it's not visible from the scene. You can actually just hide it, but I want to be able to find it easily. And I'm going to add a new material to that. Make it very rough and make it sort of woody. Hey, thanks for the follow. Oh yeah, and by the way, there is a giveaway going on. If you want to win Prison Architect, which is a prison management game, you can enter contest by typing in !enter into chat. And I'll do a draw when I get to 50 followers. But thank you, I appreciate the follow. So let's see. Yeah, we've got a spot where we've got a lot of plants visible. Let's render this up. And yeah, you should be entered. For some reason it doesn't. It's both, it's enter and ticket. They should both work, but it doesn't give you a prompt that you got entered. So let's actually go to the giveaway page just to double check. Yep, you do have your entry. You're the most recent. You don't have enough points? What? Oh no, because you only have 100 points, but you are entered, so don't worry. I can show you. Let's go to browser overlay. There you are, most recent entry. Bonk. So unfortunately it doesn't give you a chat prompt, I don't know why. So one thing that I've noticed now, in the render, when we render out these particles, what it has done is it's hidden the actual terrain that they're on, which looks a little bit weird. So that's a little setting that is under the particle settings. Don't know why it's on by default, but I guess for some uses you want that. We want under the render settings to say show emitter. And now if I press F12 to render, it should show the terrain. There we go. So we'll add more detail and stuff into that, but it really just makes it feel a lot more natural. And got some randomness and stuff. We can also do the exact same thing with rocks. So we can add the texture and stuff, but then we can also add randomness with added objects. So I'm going to add let's go for, I installed an add-on for where is it, mesh, rock generator. This is in the default plugins for Blender. So you don't need to get it somewhere else. It's under one of the add-ons in there. Wait, I didn't want to undo that. I just wanted to see it. So we save in case. Add rocks. Because unfortunately when you leave the settings for these things, it loses the dialog box for the settings. Rock generator. Let's have a look. So we want to make it more deformed, maybe. Whoa. That seems to be quite a slow plugin. My Blender has frozen. Lame. So, while we wait for that, I'm gonna thank my patrons. Don't know if any of you besides Luke are in here. Luke is here. Luke, thank you. Just thought I'd say. Where's a Patreon? I forget my own chat code sometimes. And all these videos that I've been recording for this series on the Lord of the Rings stuff are on YouTube. I try and put them on like as soon as I can. Let's see, River Rock has got presets. So if you want to catch up and it's like past the VOD lifetime, which I think is 2 weeks for me or something, you can always watch them on YouTube. So it's all under Photon Wind. Because today we breezed through in the first hour. Let's go for just some random thing over here, and then I'm gonna put this all over the scene again. Let's see. Oh, that's interesting. So it makes a little layered rock thing. It's enormous though. Let's put a... Oh nice, it's got a modifier stack. Let's turn this into global coordinates. So now when this moves around, it should... Oh, it's got so many different displacements on here. That's why. But now if I use this as a particle as it moves around, it should have a little bit of variation as we're going around. Yeah, so every one of these will be a bit different. So if I just plonk this over there somewhere, give it a rock material, go into our terrain and add a new particle system. And yeah, I'm going overboard with these particles because it's fun. I enjoy them. So I'm going to put it on the first group because that goes all over the show, but it's fine. So I'm going to do some random scaling, turn its physics off. You don't need to do that for the hair because you have to actually manually enable physics for hair. But for ordinary particles you do need to do all this stuff because by default these things are designed for like explosions and, you know, particle effects. Let's make these 2,500 rocks. And random rotation. And render as object. Select our rock. You can't see him, but he's there off on the side of the screen. And now because that's using a complicated object as geometry for the particles, it is now really messing with my scene. Come on, Blender, wake yourself up. What are you doing? It's gone crazy. Now let's go for a scale of 0.8. Actually, let's make them even bigger. And now we could actually have some rocks that pop out of the water a bit, which might look cool. Depending on how the randomness of this stuff was. So that's just a nice way to add even more randomness to your scene. Just particle systems for different bits of foliage, different, you know, trees, rocks, and stuff like that. So let me... There's a rendered version of that. So I mean, of course this doesn't look good because we've got no materials on there. And you probably wouldn't want a rock that's hanging on upside down on a cliff, but you probably just want to select a more selective region for your rocks. Yeah. And you can always say under viewport, if your thing is getting slow like mine is, especially because I'm streaming, instead of saying viewport display as rendered, you can say just display it as a none, and then suddenly everything works beautifully because my computer is too shite. And you can do that as well for the trees, because remember that's duplicating each of these things, however many times, 1,000 times, or something. Or you can say you can render it as a cross, and you can know that there is a tree there, but it's not actually rendering out the geometry of a tree. Or you can just say with these displays for the particles, the one with the camera is for renders and the one with the screen is for viewport. So you can just say visible in render but not visible in viewport, and that will just allow you to do stuff for faster editing and stuff when you're not actually working on those particles. Oh yeah, and I am using image-based lighting. So actually, if you look behind me, the scene is using a riverfront thing with a building on it, but when you look in the other direction, it's a nice little sunset. It's one of the built-in lighting things in Blender, but since we don't look backwards in this view, it's fine. You only ever really see the sunset, which looks fine. So a lot of the stuff that I do, I'm just cheating to make it look fine, and that's a lot of what 3D stuff is, just cheating. So I'm just going to save my scene, and yeah, trying to think. Ooh, yes. Something that I've been wanting to do is, remember I described these waterfalls that are at the end over here, they're called roros. They're actually supposed to be like several hundred meters tall and, make a thunderous roar. So what I want to do is make some puffy clouds of water vapor, sort of like Victoria Falls, which I think maybe Tolkien was inspired by. Isn't the name of that in one of the things translate to something thundering something? I don't remember anymore. The falls that thunder or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a gigantic shape over here. Let's see. No, not using that. Let's do a cube. Simple cube, easy to model. I'm just going to grab it, move it to the end for where my waterfalls are, scale it up an enormous amount. So yeah, about that size. So that's sort of the size that bit of our cloud will be. I'm going to rotate it so it's sort of in line with the waterfall. And then I'm going to go into face select, and then I'm just going to inset, extrude, make something sort of cloudy looking. Yes, it's blocky, but we're going to put a subsurf on it and it will look a lot more natural. So if we put a subsurf modifier on here, maybe bump it up to 2, put on shade smooth, we get a sort of a rough cloudy shape. I want to move it so it matches to align with that cliff. And yeah, that doesn't look like a cloud at the moment, but if we go and add a displace modifier and use a texture on here, I'm just using one of these random ones from the rock thing. Let's see what it looks like. Not great. If we turn it into global, we get a little bit more variation. And we don't need this to be amazing looking. You can actually turn down this subdivision, put the displacement, and then put another subdivision and sort of layer on some displacement and things like that. And let's just actually pop a couple of these up in the sky for actual ordinary clouds, and then scale them out a little bit. So yeah, we're going to do some stuff with volumetric materials on here. I've never actually used volumetric materials in Eevee, so this should be fun. I've used them in cycles, but not in Eevee. So let's add a new material, call it cloud. We're going to assign it to all of these. Too many tickets. I think you can only enter 10 times. And you have entered... I didn't realize that anyone would actually get up to 10. No, I can't change it, unfortunately. Yeah, the thing is with the giveaway, I couldn't change any settings. I can't even change the description of it anymore, which is a bit lame. I'm sorry. But that means you've still got the most entries. So we're going to turn this into a principled volume.
Embarrassing!
Fair. So instead of using the principled BSDF, I'm going to use principled volume. And a volume shader will use, instead of just using the surface, it uses the actual volume of the object. So for this, let's see. Absorption color, we don't want it to be black, we want it to be like white. And density, let's see what happens if we mess around with density. Also, birthday points. Oh, is it your birthday? Yes, it is. I'm doing a scene from the Lord of the Rings, the Argonath. So it's those two gigantic sculptures in the middle of the river Anduin that the Fellowship sails past, but then with the big lake on the other end where the Fellowship, the breaking of the Fellowship happens. Yeah, Eevee is so much nicer to work with because it's just so responsive. Like, I love cycles the way it looks, but Eevee is just so nice to work with. Nice. Welcome. Oh wait, I put this on the main volume. Derp. I didn't need to put that as a volume shader. I'm an idiot. Thank you. It's a few layers of nope. It's just in the shader. It's a few layers of what's it called? noise, so we've got a, let me go into the shader editor for you. It's a horrible looking graph, but basically we've got a wave texture in two different directions and a Voronoi texture, and then I'm just mapping those with a little bit of animation and put those into the normal map, and that's basically it. The rest is just default stuff. Sometimes, but I'm lazy. Also, my computer gets really slow when I'm streaming, so when I switch between things get messed up. So sometimes it's easier to just remain on one thing. Let's see. Now, how well does volumetrics work in Eevee? I've never actually used it. That is because I turned on time remapping, because my little animation of the sequence over here was a little bit fast, and I was too lazy to go and adjust the keyframes before the stream, so I just rendered it out with double time remapping, so there were a few more frames in the animation. So if I turn that down to 100, then it should match fine. So if I select my camera, now it will match up with that. I don't know. A long time, 15 years-ish, maybe more. But there's still lots to know about Blender. I definitely don't know everything. Especially with these new things like Eevee, where I haven't used volumes in them before. Do I have to have a surface as well? Let me just look this up. And I enjoy that emote though. Thanks for the follow, man. Or should I say fella? Let's just have a look. Just trying to figure out how to set this up for Eevee volumetrics. Is it that perhaps maybe there... Ah, that's why. It was too far from the camera. It's a custom one. So let's see. So volumetrics end. Okay, so it's 10,000 meters. Yeah, no, I just made a fairly simple one in OBS and then After Effects full animated bits. So like I have a little stinger animation for switching between scenes and stuff like that. And then my chatting screen. It's really simple shapes, but I think it's alright. Made it myself. I've worked as a designer before, so graphic designer. volumetric shadows. Now why is it that I get such... Is it just because it doesn't do that much detail? That looks so weird. Do I need more samples? No. Tile size. Yeah, so I basically finished the tutorial segment of today and now I'm just messing around. Thank you. Yeah, it's fairly simple stuff to do. Good luck and thank you. I will. I always like checking out people. They join in. Let's see. Why is this not? If I go down to 1, why does it not use the shape? Does it render? Nope, it just makes a big block, which is lame. Alright, I'm just gonna have to figure this out myself, because at the moment it's just being lame. Unless... Wait, I've got an idea. No. Okay. I'm gonna call that for today, and hopefully my zooming through stuff, you still got something out of today's stuff, and you can detail your models up a little bit more. You know, adding the foliage and rocks and stuff like that. And then on Thursday we'll go into making some cool procedural materials. So we're going to do stuff like making the vertical things have cliffy textures, and then the flatter bits maybe being grass shaded or sandy or stuff like that. And all little details about rendering and stuff. So hopefully that's fun and you enjoy. And thank you everyone for joining in. I'm going to give you all some points. Yeah, I'll see you on Thursday, and thanks for joining in. Goodbye.